I just love this time of the year, apart from the extreme heat, of course. But I love how the year starts building up momentum, Australia Day, and the buzz of the Australian Open tennis tournament. Which reminds me of some words that the famous American tennis player Arthur Ashe mentioned once. Now, Arthur grew up with a single parent during the 40s and 50s in America, where discrimination against Black Americans was systemic. You may know that he was the first Black American tennis player to be selected for the US Davis Cup team and to win 3 majors: Wimbledon, the US Open, and our own Australian Open. After he retired, someone asked him if he had advice for young upcoming tennis stars doing it tough, and he replied, "Start where you are, use what you've got, do what you can." Start where you are, being aware of the situation you are in and be real about it. Use what you've got, seeing the half full glass, and use the means, gifts or talents that you do have access to. But also, given the situation you are in and the potentially limited resources, do what you can to always, through faith in God's help and strength, do your best. You see, Ashe was forced to live like that, having had to often play tennis in the streets of Richmond as a kid, as he was not allowed to play on certain courts or did not have access to a coach due to affordability, despite his amazing talent from early age. Jesus set the perfect example of this to us when he fed the 5,000 in Luke 9 verse 11 to 12, and I read, "But the crowds learned about it and followed him. He welcomed them and spoke to them about the kingdom of God and healed those who needed healing. Late in the afternoon, the 12 came to him and said, 'Send the crowd away so that they can go to the surrounding villages and countryside and find food and lodging, because we are in a remote place here.' Jesus replied, 'You give them something to eat.' They answered, 'We have only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, unless we go and buy food for all this crowd.' But he said to his disciples, 'Have them sit down in groups of about 50 each.' The disciples did so, and everyone sat down. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke them. Then he gave them to the disciples to distribute to the people. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were still left over." Jesus started where they were, 100% aware of the situation, but not accepting the hopelessness and frustration the disciples exclaimed about the crowd, knowing God is able to do so much more, using the situation to demonstrate his power and provision. He used the mere 5 loaves and 2 fish and did what he could. He looked up to heaven, gave thanks, and started a miracle by multiplying the limited resources into 12 basketfuls of leftovers. Similarly, as 2022 continues to unfold, we should not underestimate what can be accomplished when we follow this example and trust through faith that God can use our limitations to make miracles happen or create change in places we thought were not possible. Even if, or rather, especially when we are challenged by, for example, lives of disability, mental illness, or other constant limiting circumstances. Like Charlotte Elliott, a British author, being an invalid suffering from chronic illness, left her feeling useless and frustrated to help with her local church's cause to grow. Remembering what an evangelist told her years ago, that she does not need to bring anything to Jesus except herself, she was inspired to write a poem titled, "Just As I Am." Her poem was published and she was inundated with requests for it. She learned that her poem was used to raise money for the church that she felt helpless to support. And after her death, thousands of letters were found in her home, written by people whose lives had been transformed by her words. Her poem became a song that was translated into hundreds of languages, published in more than 1,600 hymnals, It is understood that almost 90 years after Charlotte wrote her poem, God used it to settle in C.S. Lewis's heart that God calls us to him just as we are. 3 years later, a 16-year-old Billy Graham listened to a message on salvation during a revival service. When the song Just As I Am was sung at the end, Billy went forward to accept Christ. And we know the evangelism ripple effect that had across the globe. Just As I Am reached billions around the world, is still being sung and can be listened to on Spotify or iTunes still today. Let's not limit God in what he can do through us. Let's prayerfully start where we are, use what we've got, and do what we can, and trust God to do the rest. Let's continue to be willing instruments for his glory.